that is not really doing it. It's not really bringing them together. It's actually increasing the polarization and the retribalization that Americans experience. And we've seen that retribalization and polarization reach extreme limits in today's world. But when green pluralistic relativism came on the scene and started differentiating up all of Orange's universal systems, then it started to get very critical of rationality. Mm-hmm. And most of the modern rational philosophers believed in progress and happy futures for all of us and all of that. And most of them would write about the happy progress of humanity into tomorrow and so on. All of the postmodern famous writers were nothing but negative. Mm-hmm. And they were critical of modernity and its rationality. And they basically were all extremely pessimistic in their writing. And if they write about anything, it would be like Foucault going back and tracing how modern systems had screwed up everything from.
So basically what you're saying is, and I've heard you talk about this quite a bit, you sometimes, or I know it's referred to as the dark side of green, right? But basically in the stages of development, we had Orange kind of came in, the Enlightenment kind of created a lot of what we know, the Industrial Revolution happened, modern science really came in, the main thing. The 1960s then was this major shift into green, right? Postmodern, which solved a lot of problems, of the previous one, but also brought in a level of distinction and almost angst against the problems that Orange had created in the world and have created, which is why we have that, what you said, a culture war that goes on. Now, we've had culture wars before these levels came in, but perhaps it got stronger or more global just based on where we're at as a human culture, right? So that's kind of like what we're seeing, a lot of culture wars between these levels, because I've heard you say that basically every war on this planet has been a war between levels of development, right? So we're still experiencing that right now, which is what the promise of integral is, right? Which is to get to a point where that is dissolved in what you call the biggest transformation that we'll ever see, right? When that kind of goes away, which has already emerged, right? Like we already have a percent of the population, at this new level, past green, past postmodernism. Right. And I know this, part of our work in the world is to see how can we accelerate that. Right. And to start by starting is to really understanding what it is, right? Like, what is it? What is that distinction? So I think we get that green now has got some issues, hasn't really solved all the problems here, but now something else has emerged that might have some better answers.
Yeah. And that's one of the reasons that Claire Graves called it second tier and maintained it was actually the beginning of human beings at their essence. And the reason is that just as green looked upon orange and with its strong capacity of differentiation, started differentiating orange systems into multicultural systems. And the only way to handle value in that system is to claim that everybody has exactly the same worth and the same value. So it's called egalitarianism. And that's essentially the fundamental belief structure of the green stage of development. And that's also why it was the first to see systems in nature as ecosystems, because it was looking at every sentient being alive and giving it an egalitarian value. So we have to look at all of nature, which we've never looked at nature and said, I love you, I have to take care of you. But green did, because it believed that nature deserved the same amount of respect and value as all living animals did, including human beings. So it's both, in a strange sense, it's egalitarianism is an attempt at integral statements, but it's just doing it in a very primitive and non-functional way.
Right.
So what it usually says and ends up doing is breaking humanity into special groups and giving some groups that they believe have been marginalized or oppressed, they get special treatment. And so there's actually, you can hear on any YouTube channel, you can hear critics of postmodernity give postmodernity's own hierarchy of groups. Mm-hmm. And their hierarchy, it's called the Oppression Olympics. And the people that are most oppressed get the top spot. So they're generally everything from blacks to women. It used to be LGBTQ groups, but that they ended up moving in the oppression hierarchy because they got accepted and got marriage rights and all of that.
Right.
So any event, what you're seeing from this screen is because of its differentiation and increased emphasis on differentiation, one of the ways to get over that differentiation is to simply say, oh, they're actually, at the deepest core, they're all the same. It's an egalitarian structure. But because the differentiation is so strong in them, that's how they actually operate. So when they talk about the core postmodern values as being identity, equality, and diversity, that's what they're actually attempting to do, is find an integral way that they can all be brought together without just simply saying they're all equal, but not treating them.
So let's talk about that now, right? So let's talk about the next evolution. I really want to hear it. We want to hear it now, I think, because I think I get it. I think green has solved some problems, but also has its own challenges. It's kind of reaching for the integral ideals, but doesn't really embody it. What happened, right? So integral comes about, and what does it do?
So what integral does is, now that we got a sense of the problems that green brings, what integral does is integrates all of the differentiations that green has brought forth. But when it integrates them, it does so without denying real differences in the differentiations. So green wants to deny the differences, but it doesn't. It actually ends up emphasizing all the differences and then claiming that you yourself have to create an identity politics which will pull them all together. But that is not really doing it. It's not really bringing them together. It's actually increasing the polarization and the retribalization that Americans experience. And we've seen that retribalization and polarization reach extreme limits in today's world. That's because green is the leading edge of our cultural awareness. Mm-hmm. And it won't stop being the leading edge until integral reaches at least 10%. And what integral does, because cognitively, it can look at all the differentiations that green made, and it can hold all of those in its awareness and then look for ways that they can be integrated or pulled together into genuine unities or genuine wholeness. And so that's exactly what green can't do. It sort of tries to do it because each stage has something that it gets from its previous stage and from the stage that's succeeding it.